Henry Lucas was born on the 23rd of August 1936 in a one-room log cabin in Blacksburg, Virginia. His mother, Nellie Viola Lucas, was a member of the Chippewa tribe and an alcoholic who had 7 children, of which Henry and another son were supposedly by Anderson Luca. Anderson was a double amputee who lost his legs in a freight train accident and thereafter was nicknamed No Legs. "My daddy didn't do anything," Lucas later said. "He just sold pencils." However, as Lucas's mother was a prostitute, Anderson Lucas has been characterized as her pimp. Nellie would sometimes force her sons and husband to watch her having sex with her clients. Lucas said. When Lucas was aged 8, he was beaten by his mother around the head with a wooden plank, which caused him to spend 3 days in a coma. He developed an infection in his left eye, and at the age of 10, after one of his brothers struck him with a knife. His mother ignored the injury for several days until the teacher swiped him across the eye with a steel-tipped ruler, and the eyeball burst and it had to be surgically removed. It was replaced with a glass prosthetic. Both of these traumas to Lucas's head have led examining medical experts to conclude that these caused brain damage. Later evidence with CT scans showing small abnormalities in the frontal lobes, temporal lobes, and in the parts of the brain that are related to emotional control. While other medical examiners have concluded problems with his corpus callosum played a role in his aberrant behaviour and personality. Nellie would also make him cross-dress in public, purportedly so she could later pimp him out to both men and women. Eventually, Lucas's school teachers complained about his cross-dressing and a court order put an end to it. Despite this, Nellie continued to abuse and torment Lucas. She shot and killed a mule given to him by his uncle and proceeded to beat him because she had to pay to have the animal carcass removed. Lucas was frequently bullied as a child and later cited the mass rejection by his peers as a cause for his misanthropy. Commenting on his childhood, Lucas stated, his father died of pneumonia after spending the night outside in the cold. While in the 6th grade, Lucas dropped out of school and ran away from home, drifting around Virginia. As an adolescent, he began an incestuous relationship with his half-brother and started engaging in bestiality, capturing small animals and performing sexual acts on them before killing them. He claimed to have committed his first homicide at the age of 14 when he strangled 17-year-old Laura Evelyn Bernsley. Bernsley disappeared from a bus stop in Lynchburg, Virginia in March 1951. Lucas confessed to a murder on the 15th of February 1984. According to Lucas, he picked her up near Lynchburg, and after she refused his sexual advances and resisted an unsuccessful rape attempt, he killed her and buried her body in a secluded wooden area near Harrisburg, Virginia. Lucas said. As with most of his confessions, Lucas later recanted this claim. Bernsley has never been found. In late 1959, Lucas travelled to Tecumseh, Michigan, to live with his half-sister Opal Retta Jennings. Around this time, he was engaged to marry a pen pal, Stella Curtis, with whom he had corresponded while incarcerated. When Lucas's mother, then 71, visited him for Christmas, she disapproved of her son's fiancée and insisted that he move back to Blacksburg to take care of her as she grew older. He refused, and they argued repeatedly. These arguments escalated until the 11th of January 1960, when she struck him over the head with a broom, at which point he stabbed her in the neck. Lucas remembered later elaborating that he slapped her Lucas then fled. When Opal returned to the home, she discovered their mother was still alive on the bedroom floor in a pool of her own blood. Opal called an ambulance, but it arrived too late. The official police report stated that Lucas's mother died of a heart attack precipitated by the assault. Lucas was arrested in Ohio on the outstanding Michigan warrant. He claimed to have killed his mother in self-defense and said, but his claim was rejected and he was found guilty of second-degree murder and sentenced to up to 40 years imprisonment in Jackson State Penitentiary in Southern. He then attempted suicide several times by slashing his wrists and stomach with a razor. He was transferred to the Iowa State Hospital, Michigan, where he was subjected to electric shock therapy, behavior therapy, and heavy doses of antidepressants. He spent 4 years in Iowa State Hospital before returning to prison in 1966, where a social worker met Lucas whilst he was incarcerated and described him as a very inadequate individual with feelings of insecurity and inferiority. After serving 10 years in prison, he was released on the 3rd of June 1970 due to prison overcrowding. In December 1971, he was charged and sentenced to 4 to 5 years in prison for attempting to abduct a 15-year-old girl at gunpoint. He was also in violation of his probation by having a handgun in his possession. While serving his sentence for the crime, he established a relationship with a family friend and the widow of cousin Betty Crawford, who had written to him. After being released from prison in August 1975, he moved to Port Deposit, Maryland, where he married Crawford and moved in with her and her 2 daughters in Pennsylvania on the 5th of December 1975 and began working at a mushroom farm. Their marriage ended in 1975 when Betty accused Lucas of molesting her daughters. Lucas relocated to Jacksonville, Florida in 1976. At a soup kitchen, he befriended Ottis Elwood Toole. Otis Toole was born and raised in Jacksonville, Florida. His father was an alcoholic who abandoned him, and his abusive mother would dress him in girls' clothing and call him Susan. He was sexually abused as a child by many close relatives and acquaintances, including his older sister and next-door neighbour. He also claimed to have been physically beaten by his brother. He stated that his maternal grandmother was a Satanist who exposed him to various satanic practices and rituals, including grave robbing. He claimed this abuse began when he revealed his homosexuality to his family. He was often classified as having a mild intellectual disability with an IQ of 75. He also had epilepsy, which resulted in frequent grand mal seizures. Throughout his childhood, he frequently ran away from home and often slept in abandoned houses. He was a serial arsonist from a young age and was sexually aroused by fire. In the documentary Death Diploma, Toole stated that he was forced to have sex with a friend of his father's when he was just 5 years old. He felt he knew that he was gay when he was 10 years old, and that he had a sexual relationship with a neighbourhood boy when he was 12. Toole dropped out of school in the 9th grade and began visiting gay bars. He also stated that he'd been a prostitute as a teenager and that he became obsessed with gay pornography at some point. He stated that he committed his first murder at the age of 14 after being propositioned for sex by a travelling salesman. He ran over the salesman with his own car. He was first arrested at the age of 17 in August 1965 for loitering. Much of the information about his activities between 1966 and 1973 is unclear, but authorities believe that he began drifting around southwestern United States and that he supported himself by prostitution or panhandling. While living in Nebraska, he was one of the prime suspects in the 1974 murder of 24-year-old Patricia Webb. Shortly after, he left Nebraska and briefly settled in Boulder, Colorado. 1 month later, he became a prime suspect in the homicide of 31-year-old Ellen Holman, who was murdered on the 14th of October 1974. With many accusations being made against him, he left Boulder and headed back to Jacksonville. In early 1975, he returned to Jacksonville after drifting and hitchhiking through the American South. On the 14th of January 1976, he married a woman 25 years older than him. However, she left him after 3 days after discovering his homosexuality. He later said during an interview that his marriage was a tactic meant to conceal his true sexuality. In 1978, Lucas moved in with Toole and Toole's mother in Springfield, Florida, and became close to Toole's niece, 11-year-old Frida Lorraine Becky Powell, who had a mild intellectual disability and had escaped from a juvenile detention center. A period of stability followed, with Lucas and Toole working together in a roofing company between 1979 and 1981. According to Lucas, during this time they engaged in a multi-state killing spree in which they targeted hitchhikers, sex workers and migrants. He also claimed that Toole enjoyed crucifying their victims, then barbecuing and eating them. After their arrest, they were caught discussing cannibalism over a prison phone. Toole asked Lucas, Paul would also occasionally travel with the men and may have helped Lucas and Toole lure potential victims. When interviewed about his crime spree, Lucas stated, On the 4th of January 1982, Toole barricaded 65-year-old George Sonnenberg in a boarding house where he was living in Jacksonville and set the house on fire. Sonnenberg died a week later due to the injuries that he had sustained in the fire. In April 1983, Toole was arrested for an unrelated arson incident in Jacksonville. Toole confessed to the crime and was sentenced to 20 years in prison. Toole signed a confession stating that he and Sonnenberg had begun a sexual relationship and, after the two had an argument, Toole set Sonnenberg's home on fire. 2 months later, in June, Lucas was arrested for unlawful possession of a firearm. It was then that Lucas began boasting about the murderous rampage orchestrated by the two. At first, Toole denied involvement, but later began backing up Lucas's confessions. Lucas also backed Toole's confession to the murder of Adam Walsh. Lucas became widely regarded as a compliant interviewee who was used by police to clear up unsolved murders that he had not been involved in, aided by Toole giving false statements in collaboration. During Toole's trial for murdering George Sonnenberg, Toole claimed that he did not light the home on fire and only signed the confession so that he would be extradited back to Jacksonville. On the 28th of April 1984, a jury found Toole guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced him to death. Later that year, Toole was found guilty of the February 1983 strangulation murder of a 19-year-old Tallahassee, Florida woman and received a second death sentence. On appeal, however, both sentences were later commuted to life in prison. After his incarceration, Toole pleaded guilty to 4 more Jacksonville murders in 1991 and received 4 more life sentences. The murders of which Toole was ultimately convicted of were those of John McDaniel, Geraldine Peoples, Brenda Burton, Ruby McCary, George Sonnenberg, and Ada Johnson, all of whom were killed in Florida between 1980 and 1983. On the 21st of October 1983, whilst he was imprisoned for 2 unrelated murders, Toole confessed to the 1981 murder of 6-year-old Adam Walsh. A few weeks after Toole made the confession, however, police officers who were investigating the case announced that they had lost Toole's impounded car and machete. John Walsh, Adam's father, continues to believe that Toole was guilty. On the 16th of December 2008, 27 years after the murder, Hollywood, Florida police announced Toole was the murderer and that the Adam Walsh case was closed. The police didn't reveal any new physical evidence and pointed out that they still had no DNA evidence. Toole claimed that he picked up Walsh in a Sears Mall parking lot. Toole stated that Walsh came willingly because he offered Walsh candy and toys. Walsh soon wanted to go home and began to cry. Toole said that he'd punched Walsh in the face. Walsh then started to cry again, and according to Toole, he began to wallop Walsh, knocking him out. Toole eventually pulled over in a rural area and decapitated Walsh with a machete. He drove around with Walsh's head for several days, forgot about it, and after he rediscovered it, he tossed it into a nearby canal. Police officers inexplicably lost Toole's impounded car and its blood-stained carpeting, hindering their ability to proceed with the investigation into Adam Walsh's murder. In 1984, Toole confessed to 2 unsolved Northwest Florida slayings, including one of the I-10 murders. During an interview, he admitted to killing 18-year-old David Scheller, a hitchhiker who he picked up east of Pensacola. Scheller's body, bearing 5 gunshot wounds in the left side of his head, was found on the 6th of February 1980, approximately 125 feet off I-10's eastbound lane, 5 miles east of Chipley. The second confession involved the death of 20-year-old Ada Johnson. Toole confessed that he had shot her in the head on a road outside Fort Walton Beach after kidnapping her at gunpoint at a Tallahassee nightclub. Psychiatrist Dr. Urbia and Dr. Sanchez testified at Toole's 1984 Florida Supreme Court appeal that he was extremely impulsive and exhibited antisocial behaviour as a result of a personality disorder and was a pyromaniac. The court found sufficient evidence that Toole would be diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder. Hollywood, Florida Police Chief Chadwick Wagner said that Toole had been a prime suspect all along, but that he went on to admit that although Toole's case was weak, he could have been charged during the original investigation of it. Wagner acknowledged the fact that many mistakes were made by the department and apologised to the Walsh family on its behalf. Wagner also acknowledged the fact that the lack of new evidence and the inability of Toole to defend himself could provide room for skeptics to doubt Toole's guilt, saying, "If you're looking for the magic wand, that one piece of evidence, it's not there." However, after the police re-examined previously uncorrelated evidence, they and the Walsh family were both satisfied with the new report and the existing evidence which only points to Ottis Toole. On the 20th of January 1982, Lucas convinced Powell to run away with him to avoid child welfare authorities. They lived as nomads, eventually travelling to California, where an employer's wife asked them to work for her infirm mother, 82-year-old Katie Pearl Rich. 3 weeks later, Rich went missing, as were Lucas and Powell. Her relatives admonished them for failing to do their jobs, as well as writing checks on Rich's bank account. While hitchhiking, Lucas and Powell were picked up by the minister of a Pentecostal religious commune called the House of Prayer, located in Stoneburg, Texas. Believing that Lucas and then 15-year-old Powell were a married couple, the minister found Lucas a job as a roofer, while allowing the couple to stay in a small apartment on the commune where they attended church services. However, Powell became argumentative and homesick for Florida. Lucas explained her absence by mentioning she had left at a truck stop in Bowie, Texas. On the 10th of June 1983, Lucas was arrested on charges of unlawful possession of a firearm by Texas Ranger Phil Ryan, Whilst in jail, Lucas wrote a letter to the sheriff He later confessed to the murders of Powell and Rich. He claimed that he had lured Powell into an isolated field in Denton, Texas on the 23rd of August 1982, stabbed her in the chest, engaged in necrophilia with her corpse, before he dismembered and decapitated her and scattered her body to pieces. In Ringgold, Texas on the 16th of September 1982, he reportedly lured Rich to join him in a search for Becky on a camping ground. He then stabbed her in the chest, killing her, then carved an inverted cross on her chest, and also committed necrophilia with her, before stuffing her body into a drainage pipe. Lucas led police to their purported remains. However, forensic evidence alone was inconclusive, and the coroner was unable to positively identify either corpse. Lucas's participation in the investigation would serve to boost his credibility in later confessions to other crimes. Lucas later denied involvement, but the consensus was that he did murder Powell and Rich. In November 1983, he was transferred to jail in Williamson County, Texas. He reported that he attempted suicide after receiving rough treatment by the inmates. He claimed that police stripped him naked, denied him cigarettes and bedding, held him in a cold cell, mutilated his genitalia, and prevented him from contacting an attorney. After 4 days in jail, Lucas pleaded guilty to the 2 murders of Powell and Rich. In court, then also claimed to have committed over 100 additional murders. In interviews with law enforcement personnel, Lucas confessed to numerous additional unsolved killings. It was thought that there was positive corroboration with Lucas's confessions in 28 unsolved murders, so the Lucas Task Force was established by James B. Adams, the director of the Texas Department of Public Safety. The task force officially cleared hundreds of previously unsolved homicides as a result of Lucas's confessions. Lucas received preferential treatment that was extremely lax for someone supposedly thought to be a mass murderer. He was frequently taken to restaurants and cafes, rarely handcuffed, allowed to wander police stations and jails, and even knew codes for security doors. Later attempts at determining Lucas's involvement in his confessed crimes were complicated when it was discovered that he'd been given access to information in the files of cases he was confessing to. There were suggestions that the interview tapes showed that Lucas would read the reactions of those interviewing him and alter what he was saying, thereby making his confessions more consistent with facts known to law enforcement. Journalist Hugh Ainsworth and others investigated the veracity of Lucas's claims for articles that appeared in the Dallas Times-Herald. They calculated that Lucas would have had to use his 13-year-old Ford station wagon to cover 11,000 miles in 1 month to have committed the crimes police attributed to him. After the story appeared in April 1985 and revealed the flawed methods of the task force, law enforcement opinion began to turn against their claims that the crimes had been solved. The bulk of the Lucas report was devoted to the detailed timeline of Lucas's claimed murders. The report compared his claims to reliable, verifiable sources for his whereabouts. The results often contradicted his confessions, thus casting doubt on his participation in most of the crimes he had confessed to. Texas Attorney General Jim Mattox wrote that Lucas's case damaged the reputation of the Texas Ranger Division, caused a re-evaluation in police techniques, and created greater awareness of the possibility of false confessions. Investigators didn't consider that the apparently trivial comforts such as steak dinners, milkshakes, and access to television in return for confessions to crimes of extreme seriousness might encourage prisoners such as Lucas, who had little to lose, to make false confessions. Investigators also let Lucas see the case files so that he could refresh his memory, making it easy to seemingly demonstrate knowledge of facts that only the perpetrator would know. The police also didn't record their interviews, making it impossible to know for sure how much information interviewers accidentally gave Lucas unprompted. Lucas was ultimately convicted of 11 homicides, including those of his mother along with Powell and Rich. He had been sentenced to death for one then unidentified woman dubbed as Orange Socks, whose body was found in Williamson County on Halloween 1979, despite a timesheet recording his presence at work in Jacksonville, Florida, on that day. Lucas was granted a stay on his death sentence after it was discovered that details in his confession came from the case file which he had been given to read. The sentence was commuted to life imprisonment in 1998 by then Governor George W. Bush. On the 12th of March 2009, at 11 p.m, Lucas was found dead in prison from congestive heart failure at the age of 64. He is buried at Captain Joe Bird Cemetery in Huntsville, Texas. Toole died of cirrhosis at the Florida State Prison on the 15th of September 1996 at the age of 49. His body went unclaimed, and he was buried in the Florida State Prison Cemetery. Lucas's credibility was damaged by his lack of precision. He initially admitted to having killed 60 people, a number he raised to over 100 victims, which police accepted, then a figure of 600 that led him to not being taken seriously. DNA evidence has verified that Lucas didn't kill his 20 supposed victims. Of more than 3,000 murder cases in which he was a suspect, police believed more than 200 cases were committed by him. However, he remained publicised as America's most prolific serial killer, despite denials such as stating, "I am not a serial killer." Some continue to believe, nonetheless, that Lucas was responsible for a massive number of killings. Criminologist Eric Hickey cites an unnamed investigator who interviewed Lucas several times and concluded that he had probably killed about 40 people. Such assertions were given little credence, with law enforcement involved refusing to corroborate these claims. An experienced Texas Ranger, to whom Ryan's team allowed access to Lucas, said that although it was obvious to him that Lucas often lied, there was an instance where he demonstrated guilty knowledge. Other Rangers had similar experiences with Lucas. In total, Lucas was convicted of 11 murders, the deaths of Viola Lucas, Becky Powell, and Kate Rich, as well as 26-year-old schoolteacher Linda Jane Phillips, who disappeared on the 8th of August 1970 in Richardson, Texas, a suburb of Dallas, whilst returning from a party to a parent's home in Kaufman County, Texas. A mutilated body was found on the 10th of August. She had sustained 26 stab wounds and had been sexually abused. Lucas confessed to the murder and claimed that he forced Phillips' car off the road at about 2:30 a.m. Lucas then allegedly forced her into his car at gunpoint, made her disrobe, then stabbed her in the throat, chest and stomach. The body of patrolman Clemmy Everett Curtis, 30, was found on the 3rd of August 1976, handcuffs near his patrol car in a wooded area just outside the Huntington, West Virginia city limit. He'd been shot through the chest once. Lucas confessed that he and Toole had killed Curtis. Lily Pearl Darty, 18, accepted a ride with Lucas on the 11th of November 1977 at a gas station in Harrison County and was later sexually assaulted and shot in the head. A decomposing body was found 3 weeks later in a wooded area north of Marshall, Texas. 23-year-old Deborah Louise Jackson, formerly known as Orange Socks, when unidentified, is believed to have been murdered on the 30th or 31st of October 1979 in Georgetown, Texas. Her body was found naked except for a pair of orange socks, from which her nickname was derived. She had been strangled and was believed to have only died hours before the discovery. On the 26th of April 1981, Lucas allegedly broke into the apartment of 17-year-old babysitter Diana Lynn Bryant in Brownfield, Texas, with the intent of robbing it. He then took a knife, carried it to cut loose the cord on a vacuum cleaner and used it to strangle Bryant. Diana's father was satisfied with Lucas's confession and the case was closed. Glenna Faye Briggers, 65, was found by a neighbour on the 20th of December 1982 in Hale County, Texas. A butcher knife had been thrust into her stomach and a fork into her throat. According to Lucas, he broke into her home, killed her, then stole $180. Laura Marie Purchase, 26, was discovered on the 17th of March 1983, dead in a burning wooded area near League Line Road in Montgomery County, Texas. She had been reported missing from Houston on the 5th of March. An autopsy determined that she had been sexually assaulted and strangled. In 2008, DNA testing ruled Lucas out as a suspect in her case. In 2021, another man was charged with a murder. On the 16th of April 1983, 16-year-old Laura Jean Donnez skipped school in Houston but was never seen again. On the 18th of April 1989, an oil-field worker spotted a fire burning in a wooded area near Logging Road in Montgomery County, Texas. Donnez had been strangled, raped, beaten about the head, and her body burned after death. Lucas confessed to her murder and was able to lead police to where her body was discovered. Although almost all of Lucas's confessions have been discredited or entirely proven false, both he and Toole still remain credible suspects in the deaths of several women based on compelling circumstantial evidence. Cases in which they are both seen as viable suspects are as follows. On the 27th of June 1977, detectives responded to a wooded area off Old Union Church Road outside of Townsend, Delaware, after the remains of 50-year-old Marie Petrie Hazer were found in an open field. She had suffered blunt force trauma to her head and had fought back against her assailant. Lucas lived in Elkin, Maryland, at the time near where Hazer's remains were found. Investigators also found that writings Lucas made had many similarities to the crime scene. 45-year-old Stella Ellen McLean disappeared from a restaurant in Scottsbluff, Nebraska on the 7th of February 1978. On the 15th of April 1978, her headless body was discovered near Interstate 25 in Platte County, Wyoming. She'd been raped and strangled. Her head was never recovered. In September 1984, Jim Larson, an investigator for the Scottsbluff County Sheriff's Department in Nebraska, questioned Lucas about Stella's murder. Larson asked deceptive questions to test Lucas, but apparently Lucas offered a compelling testimony to support his claims of killing McLean. 40-year-old Janet Lee Callies was last seen at the Sandbar, a bar near Interstate 80 in Grand Island, Nebraska on the 15th of November 1978. In 1984, Lucas confessed to a murder and stated that he and Toole had strangled Callies and buried her body. Lucas managed to recall personal details about Callies, such as how she had 3 children. 19-year-old Cheryl Ann Schreier was last seen working her shift at the Rhodes Road Pump Your Own Gas Station, self-service gas station in Scott City, Missouri on the 17th of April 1979 at 11:45 a.m. Toole and Lucas both admitted to authorities that they had killed and abducted a young woman nearby about the time Schreier vanished. She was the only girl reported missing in the region at the time, despite Lucas's claims to the contrary when police showed him a photo of her. Even though it was proved that Toole's niece and nephew, as well as Lucas and Toole, were present in Scott City, Missouri at the time of her disappearance, there was not enough evidence to bring charges against them. A highway worker discovered the body of an unidentified woman on the 29th of October 1981 in Iola, Texas. The cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head. She was known as the Grimes County Jane Doe and was also wrapped in a plastic bag. Lucas confessed to a murder, stating that he drove the victim to the area from Durham, North Carolina, and claiming that her name might have been Cheryl. He then strangled her while Toole beat her in the head with a tire iron. He was able to lead police to the area in which her body had previously been found. Thanks for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts and opinions about this case in the comments below. And also let me know if there's any true crime cases that you would like to see me cover on this channel. And I will be back next Friday with another true crime video. Thanks for watching.